Welcome to another edition of Rediscovering Conservatism, a webcast series that is jointly sponsored by New Direction and Fundación Civismo, where we will seek to engage with some of the freshest thinking on the European right. And today we are delighted to be joined by Professor Krasnodebski, who has sat in the European Parliament as an MEP since 2014, though in a previous life, Professor Krasnodebski had a distinguished academic career, both in his native Poland and in Germany, a country that he knows full well. Professor Krasnodebski got a PhD in 1991 with a fascinating thesis entitled The Fall of the Idea of Progress from the University of Warsaw, where he had also taught sociology, social theory, philosophy. During the 1990s, Professor Krasnodebski taught at the University of Bremen in Germany, and he's also visited as a lecturer the universities of Columbia, Princeton, a number of others. And in Brussels and Strasbourg since 2014, he has been, he was vice president in the previous European Parliament. And in this one, he holds the no less important role of member of the working group on the Conference on the Future of Europe. And Professor, that is where I want to start, where I want to kick off our conversation here today. You urged at a recent plenary session in Strasbourg to make the EU anew. And I wonder if you can briefly lay out some of the objectives of this 2-year series of conferences, what the conference is meant to deliver, what your role in it has looked like, and what can we as conservatives and as Euro realists expect from this initiative?
Yes, of course, it's complicated because it depends on whom we are talking about, who is expected what. And I just would like to say what are the plans of the Commission, or where the plans, because as you know, pandemic is an obstacle of the organizing of this conference. It should be actually series of the conferences started already in this year, and they should then finish in 2 years during the presidency of France in the European Union. And generally, it was one of the main points of the program for Ursula von der Leyen, as she created the new and became a new chairwoman of the chair of the new commission. The idea behind it is simply, on one hand, one wanted to engage the citizens in the dialogue about the future of Europe. We know there's some crisis and also differences between citizens. So it should be actually 2 tracks of this series of conferences, one political, so plenary conferences, and the other some kind so-called agoras, assemblies of the citizens' assemblies. What the expectation of federalists who actually have, as we know, some kind of domination in the European institution and also European Parliament, what their intention was actually to go further in integration of Europe and to, in this sense, to mobilize citizens, and to, I would say, also to exert some kind of pressure on the governments, and eventually, because the discussion should be an open-ended, and eventually they should lead to change of treaties. So there was the hopes of the federalists. I was working in the group which was organized by, which was proposed by President Sassoli, representative of the different political groups, and we actually in this working group we discussed in the end of the last year the organization of the conference. But also in reaction to this idea, we decided also to create own working group in our political fraction, in ECR group, And we had some discussion, what can we do as a conservative and in Europe in order that our voice would be also present in the discussion, that we can also propose something what would be probably a different vision of Europe. So I would say there was a lot of skepticism on the side of my colleagues from ECR group, of many citizens which we represented. We represent because they think that this conference, even in the principle, should be pluralistic and open-ended. Actually, is a plan to go further with this kind of integration, about which we are quite critical.
Sure, and it's really great, Professor, and I appreciate you giving us that sort of inside look into some of the workings of the conference. This has obviously been, as you said, hailed by the Euro-federalist segment of the European Parliament and of the broader opinion of the EU as a great opportunity to you know, as a sort of a leap ahead in integration. And it's great to see that the conservative or the Euro-realist sensibility is going to be heard as part of the workings of this group through your work in it. So we appreciate you giving us that sort of inside look. I want to shift gears.
May I also add to this? So I just that of course we are also started in in Europe, also in my country. I don't know how it's in Spain or the other countries, start to discuss this topic, and among Euro realist and conservative, and with the questions, what kind of Europe, what kind of union we want. And even I must say that on our side, there are two visions of this, of this future, of the adequate to our conception and our vision, Europe and Union are. As on one hand, there is a very minimalistic concept, you know, some kind, like our British colleagues always were proponent. That means we should collaborate mainly in the economic sphere, free trade, and so on. But on the other hand, there's also a different kind of approach, which is probably now more realistic in the sense that really refers to the sentiments of many people, even the people Europeans who are conservative, who are attached to national tradition, to Christian tradition, and so on. That means a different kind of union. And as a kind of the experiment, we with some colleagues, and main person was our Belgian colleagues, professor of history, who moved to Poland. We proposed a new preamble to future constitution of Europe. And this Europe, what we now, this vision, which is of course not very concrete, we called it union or confederation of the European nations. So it's more, I would say, something which actually has to show that that the accusation which we sometimes hear from our liberal or social democratic or Christian democratic colleagues, that we want to go back to the nation states, you know, egoistic nation states which fight each other, which are only concentrated on very local nationalistic concerns. That this accusation is false. We are, I would say, you know, we conservative, we are true. Europeans, because we love Europe, we love heritage of Europe, and really diversity of Europe, diversity of European nation and their culture. So it's and I think it is the position we should defend. Our position as a really true Europeans against those who actually hate Europe, real Europe with its heritage, its history, its past and present.
Well, that's incredibly useful, Professor, and it's sometimes these are the sort of differences that can get lost out in the media coverage of these debates, and I really appreciate you delving into some of the granular level of the differences that we may even have among conservatives, and you're a realist, and how we may even among ourselves differ in how we see European integration. And as you said, it's a very handy argument that the federalists can make against us. And famously, Guy Verhofstadt is very fond of saying, the era of the nation state is over, and we certainly may believe in the sovereignty and the relevance of the nation state, but we got to be able to offer a positive vision of what it is that the EU should be doing. So I appreciate you giving us that kind of view. And I want to shift gears, Professor, here to another set of issues where you've been very active working in the European Parliament, which are the defense and security set of issues. And you've been the rapporteur of a European Parliament report on the so-called European Defense Fund. And I wonder, just generally, what role do you think the European Union can play, if it has played any role, or what role should it play in building up the defense capabilities, the military preparedness of European nation states? And then shortly after, I'll shift gears to Poland, the situation of Poland specifically. But what is the European Defense Fund's role in building that sort of military preparedness?
Yeah, you see, we conservative, we are not utopian, and we know that this world is not safe, and the security issue is very important. And so I agree with all this who say that we have to do more for our defense, for our security. Even especially I would say our American friends are talking about this since many years. They say that we rely on the protection of United States now in cooperation with the United States, complementary to NATO. We should, in supporting of NATO, we should develop their own capabilities and strengthen our defense ability. Mm-hmm. And this fund is, I would say, first step. It is not actually the fund which aim primarily on the questions of the security and defense, because it's a fund which should support actually cooperation in the defense industry. Mm. And industry not also in the production of weapons, but to support research, especially disruptive technologies, and also prototypes. That means the development. And this is one point. We all know that many important inventions like internet, for instance, they were invented in the defense sector, and later, they had an impact, huge impact also in the civil industry and so on. So this is also, for this reason, this fund for me had this aspect for not only for cooperation, the defense research and development, but also in the future probably it could be also strengthened our invention in other sector of industry. And one of the aims is also to strengthen the cooperation, cross-border cooperation, to engage SMEs and so on. And this is also what was very important for me, widening, because also coming back to your previous questions, we all know that Europe, the Union, should be the principle or union of the equal nation, and we are not equal in a way. Our countries there are big differentiation in the economic situation and the strengthening of national economies, and also especially also in this field, defense industry. We have actually, it's only several countries which cooperate with each other. And I see in this fund also the chance for widening the cooperation. For instance, my country wanted to be a partner of the French and German company in, of course, modest partner, in this project of the construction of the new tank for Europeans armies, for national armies, which was very important. It was difficult because our partner do not like, especially if a French partner is at the moment hesitant about this idea. But there are other such cases in which we could cooperate and build also up a trust between us, because I know that there are some countries, especially it's concerned France and maybe Spain, that for which they are, from geopolitical reason, they are looking to the south. The questions of the east border, east frontier of the Europe are also not so important. But actually, we have to learn from each other that it is that all this problem are our problem, European, South and the East and so on. And also the questions, of course, in the future, more autonomy. Some of my colleagues are talking about strategic autonomy of Europe. I think it's quite... now it's rather a political fantasy than the reality, but there should be some sectors, some realms, some parts of our industry that should be considered as a priority, and it should be not so dependent from outside. It concerns energy, but also telecommunication, for instance. And we have to be prepared to the world in which there are neo-imperial tendencies and some of this post-imperial also, like Russia, they are quite aggressive, and we know now what happened in Belarus and how difficult the situation there is. So, but as I say, this fund, European Defence Fund, it's a first step to and cooperation, especially in of industry.
Sure, and that's a very useful way to frame the work that you do and that you've done as a rapporteur of this report, and certainly it's heartening to hear the positive role that the EU can eventually play through mechanisms like the EDF to build up our defense preparedness in a world where we can no longer take the American security blanket for granted, it's really funny you mentioned that in those terms, because we tend to call ourselves, and ECR certainly uses this label a lot, as Euro realists, and realism also concerns the foreign policy space and being able to realize that the world is not it's not safe, and we need to act on that basis. But I want to zero in here for a second, Professor, on Poland specifically, which has been on the news in the sort of the defense and security space. earlier in the summer, President Trump announced that he was relocating, I believe, 1,000 troops from Germany to Poland as part of a larger troop redeployment. I think some other countries were also benefiting from this redeployment. I believe Italy and Belgium, but Poland was a major beneficiary. And when this happened, it was hailed as a sort of a way to reward Poland, which is a country that has taken its defense responsibilities more seriously than other countries in the Union. It's one of the countries, along with the Baltics, that is closest to hitting or at the 2% mark for NATO defense spending. And I wonder what role can a country like Poland, which is geostrategically very relevant for a number of issues, some of which you've just described there with Russia, but what role can a country like Poland, the state and the private sector, play in luring and urging other countries to beef up their defense spending? Is there a role that Poland can play here on this issue?
Yeah, I think that as a general, if we look also, and these questions about security and questions how we should we spend more for our defense and so on, and we look back in the some years that let's say last 10 years, that in many cases my country was right, whereas our partner, who was sometimes were very critical about our position and accused us of, let's say, Russophobia, for instance, or some kind of hysteria and so on. They were wrong. They were wrong. So this is one against to this idea to be realistic. It means to look at the world. How is it? And you probably remember there was a time also in NATO and generally in Europe, but also partly also in the United States. There was the idea that especially in Europe we do not need strong armies, because what we need there is a small, very specialized unit to intervene in the world, let's say in Afghanistan and so on. And actually there is no danger of the big war in Europe, and even I would say the previous Polish government, which was liberal government, thought in this way, and actually reduce our numbers also. What I mentioned, tanks, that everybody said, well, why do we need this kind of equipment? And there's no need anymore in Europe for such a kind of equipment. And it's changed a lot since Ukraine crisis, you know. But before Ukraine crisis, we had a Georgia war forgotten. We had the Balkan War, what also shows that all this dogma that there is no possibility of the war in Europe is wrong, because even now we have a war on the border of eastern border of Ukraine, which is a part of Europe, and we have Nagorno-Karabakh and so on. And so current government and Polish conservatives from this means decided, of course, to strengthen the Polish army, and that means that for us this 2% of our budget for GDP for defense, it's rational, it's minimum, I would say. And so we make a big effort to modernize our army, and our more reliable partner is United States. And I know that some of our French friends were annoyed that we did not buy some, equipment from France and so on. But in some respect, our assessment of the situation, also of the situation in terms of security, is much more similar to American one than to the French one. And this is also one of the problems of Europe. Maybe we can create in the future on such common view. I would actually appreciate this very much. So I think if you ask about the role of Poland, the role is make the other Europeans more sensitive to this questions of security, of that there is to destroy some kind of illusion or to deconstruct some kind of illusion concerning Russia. Sometimes I hear from my conservative colleagues from other countries, especially France. I don't know how it's in Spain, how it's but in France it is very, very, very often that they think that Russia today, President Putin is defender of the tradition of the Christian values, and you see, it's for us in Poland, Vladimir Putin is only a continuator of the tradition of the Russian despotism, and it had nothing to do with what we think about this traditional values, family, nation, God, and so on. And what also for us is important, because when we are talking about this, that federalists have no monopoly on the vision of Europe, that also liberals should not have a monopoly on the freedom and liberty. We conservative, we actually fight for liberty, understood better as an abstract individual or liberty of so-called negative liberty, which we are talking about liberty of nation, of the groups, and base of some responsibility. And I think this kind of thinking has also an important role in understanding also international situation and the role of Europe in the East and in the South, in both directions. Yeah.
This is very, very enlightening, Professor, and I really appreciate you going into some of the intellectual, some of the arguments underlying here, the question of defense, and how you've framed Poland's role and the thinking that underlines Poland's strategic posture as being anchored in first of all the understanding that there is a threat to the East, and there's also the responsibility for European nations to commit to deliver on their NATO commitments, and this is really important for our audience to hear, and I appreciate you framing in those terms. I wonder if we can turn maybe to the issue of demography, where I know you've also been very active. You've the ECR party has a working group on demography, intergenerational, and family policy, where you've been a co-chair. And earlier in May this year, this working group, where you're a co-chair, produced the gloomily titled report, Europe's Demographic Winter, where you have a preface there, which is also very gloomy. And I wonder if you can maybe just speak generally to what you're trying to what you're working on there on that working group. And also, there's also, I'm really glad we can get to talk about demography, because that's another example of an issue where Central Europe, countries like Poland, and Western Europe are speaking on totally different levels, right? It seems like whenever we speak of demographic decay in Western Europe, immediately people will bring on the issue of immigration. We need to import labor. We need, and that essentially ties into the argument around multiculturalism. And Poland, a country like Poland, has a totally different approach, right? Can you maybe speak to some of the pro-family policies that the government in Poland has been implemented recently, and how does your working group view the necessity of having a strong pro-family policy as a way to stem the demographic decay of Europe?
Yes, in this working group we invited many leading demographers, and we publish a small booklet about this, which is a result of this discussion. And some of them argue very interesting why immigration is not solution and cannot be a solution of our demographic problem. And this problem are severe, so very, 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 very important. And because they are long-term problems, then nobody actually is trying in politics tackle this problem, especially even there was a many announcement that also European Union will, or the European Commission will at least take assessment of the situation, make assessment of the situation, but it's never happened. And why it's so dramatic? Yeah, because of very low birth rate, of course, but also, for instance, what is almost totally neglected as the result of inner European migration. You know, according to demography, there would be only half of the population of Bulgaria in 2015, because it is especially, we can especially see this in the Eastern European country. It's also connected with it. It's brain drain. You know, that we have a very paradox situation that many educated in Poland doctors are working later in so-called West, in Germany or France, especially in Germany. So actually, we country which is not so wealthy as Germany, we educated, you know, personnel for German health system, and the same is about Hungary and so on. So it's a we are talking about Europe, and one of the achievements is mobility of the Europeans, but this mobility is always, almost everything has also negative aspects. And now what we can change, maybe one word, why immigration is not a solution. Yeah, it's just, there are some demographic reasons why it's not solution, but it's of course, there's some limited capacity to absorb immigration. We know now what happens in France, for instance. Huge immigration is always connected with cultural change, with building up parallel societies, with tensions, with changing of identity, and also political change. And we are thinking, and I think we true conservative European, that also Europeans have human rights, and one of the right of the people in Europe, of the group and nation, is to stay like they are. They of course are changing historically, but they have right to preserve own language, and culture, and religion, and way of life. And we all remember what was the big quarrel when there was announced by Ursula von der Leyen that one of the commissioners should be commissioner for the protection of the European way of life. Yeah, nobody was wanted.
You wonder what they
to
mean.
reformulate. Yeah, it shows how limited our discussion is. So this is why, on the other hand, I would say, of course, there is immigration. There always will be. That some people will live in a different country. This is nothing. There's also always the questions of the cultural distance. You see, in my country, the people do not like to accept the immigration from Middle East, and this is very easy to explain. We have there's no geographic proximity, there's no historical ties, we are not post-colonial country. But on the other hand, there's inclination, there's no problem to accept the people from Ukraine or on Belarusian. Belarusia, now, for instance, Poland announced a special program for the people who would like escape from persecution in Belarusia. And they could work in Poland and so. And it should be also accepted, but it is not the solution of our demographic problems. In order to tackle demographic problems, we have to change our social policy. And I think this means this to reconcile the work and the role in the family, motherhood. It should be one of the biggest issue in social policy. And we also have to support families, especially big families. And as you probably know, we started 2015 this program in Poland. This was actually child allowances. This was the first really effective such kind of social program in Poland since the downfall of communism. And there was, of course, met with criticism here in the European Union, in the European press, and so on. And but you know, I would say this was in a way innovative to combine to. When we are conservative, then we should be. This is a kind of organic conservatism. We think also, you know, not only in the terms of free market and individuals, actually in neoliberal terms, but we should think also about family and duties, also social duties and of the state. And it was quite successful. Because in changing of the, if you look at all this statistic concerning poverty of children in Poland, it changed a radical situation of the Polish families. But this is only social problem. The questions, you know, we should also rethink the woman question. It's a very important question of the contemporary life. Yeah. Because we cannot be conservative in this sense that we just say there's only one role of the woman, to be in the family and to be mother and to take care of the family. Because of course, a modern woman would like to be follower, let's say, from Maria Curie-Skłodowska and Angela Merkel, let's say, and. But on the other hand, we have also to contribute to Renaissance, also to the and traditional value, and to make also this role of the woman and man who stay in the family and work from the family and have a children and educate these children as something what should be seen as an indifferent way as it's seen. So I would say also value change is very important. We have to change our way in we think what is really important in life, and I think it is changing, because now I think that more and more people realize how important is not only for nation to have a new generation, but for all of us, how important it is to have a family and children and to how it's important to raise the children, and what important is also this traditional role of women in the family. So I would say social policy, but connected as a combined with this value change, and very important role is of course religion and so on, and also a need to adopt. This is general, I would say. We should adopt our conservative. This should be a modern conservative to the situation and rethink something which are important from contemporary men and women.
Sure, and that's a very comprehensive outlook you've just laid out there of the issue, and I really appreciate you. This is really not only about emphasizing border security, let alone immigration policy. There's a larger question that this demographic decay poses, and one of the things that you do in your working group with the report you released in May is really delve deeper. I would really encourage people to head over to the ECR Party's webpage and to read out the report, really get stuck in it, and you've got a lot of really interesting academic perspectives from demographers who have looked into the issue for a long time, and as you said, this is a deeper issue, and it calls for a broad set of policy responses, some of which Poland has already put in place, as you said, with pro-family policy and with a deeper rethink of maternity and birth rates. But it's great to hear that kind of perspective and to have other countries of Europe kind of take inspiration from that approach. I wonder if we can turn over, Professor, here to another issue where you've also been very active and a leader in the European Parliament and in ECR, which is the issue of the energy and the environment. You sit on the Committee for Industry, Research and Energy in the Parliament. You were the author of that committee's draft opinion on the European Green Deal, the so-called Green Deal. You've otherwise been very vocal in calling out the EU's overzealous attempt to regulate the climate at the expense of industries, livelihoods, a lot of people who depend on energy generation, and a lot of people who would be put at risk by an eventual by so-called energy transition. I guess my question is, how can we can you maybe speak a little bit to the role that you've had in the Parliament with that draft opinion? What's your general sense of where the European Green Deal is going, and how much of a threat it really poses to a country like Poland and generally to Europe? And what's a workable alternative? How should we be making the case for an energy policy and an environmental policy that doesn't try to do away with huge swaths of the economy that depend on energy and would be put at risk by the transition?
No, yes, as you know, this climate policy is one of the important topics in the European politics and generally, and in a way it also affects all the other politics, I would say, especially industrial policy, but also I say has important meaning for the institution competences of European institution, Commission, and so on now, because when we now plan in the European Commission plan the zero emission economy in 2050, then that means we have to move in this direction. And sometimes I ask myself if you are not again in the plan economy, that we are planning economy for 30 years, and there's one planning institution, European Commission, and European Commission will monitor the situation in the countries and so on. And now, as you know, that in last term, we decided to make a reduction of the greenhouse gases emission 2013, 40% compared to 1990. And at this time, it was already very controversial because many industry, the sectors of industry were said that there's over ambitious targets. And now this commission came with the proposal, to achieve already this reduction of the emission in 2030 by 55%. And if I observe the situation in the European Parliament, there's some kind of the competition between the member of the different fraction who gives more, and sometimes we conservative politician and conservative European are accused that we are populist. But if somebody is populist in the European Parliament, it's these people, because of course they argue under some kind of pressure of especially younger generation in Europe. This is a Greta Thunberg effect. There's a small fraction actually in European Parliament, the European Greens, but exert a huge influence on the other. And so it's some kind of also moral terror, and this competition actually leads to the situation where there is a lack of realism. And I think we conservative, of course, we are for protection of the environment. Yeah, we are in this sense. We would like to protect a human institution like nation and family and so on, and human nature and human life from conception to natural death. But also we would like also to protect environment, to have a more traditional agriculture, for instance, maybe transport, more clean transport and so on. But I think the discussion is about how we can achieve this, and not to harm our industry, especially now in the situation of the consequence of pandemic, and we do not know what these consequences would be because we are on the verge of the next step of this pandemic. Today we had a discussion with ACER, with one of the European agency, which is about regulation in this field, energy and so, and they were very in presentation quite optimistic, because they said thanks to the pandemic we will achieve the decarbonization goals sooner. Yeah, okay, let's say after 5-10 wave of this pandemic we can achieve even zero emission probably. but it is not the price we would like to pay for zero emission or low emission economy. This is I think the problem. And what we propose, for instance, in my opinion, fit regular committee, and there was actually more cautious way to look at what can we achieve, what is feasible, what is not feasible, in which sectors we can move forward, in which it is not possible. What is a just transition? What for us is also very important, because you see, we can of course say that we have a common targets, but on European level. But it is to say that we should move in the same way. Very different countries, very different starting points, with very different geographical conditions, is just unjust, and this is not very, it is not very, I would say, fair. Yeah, concerning the questions of the European solidarity, because we know that. Let's say this is not a country which is a member of the European Union, but associated with the European Union. Iceland can use geothermal and without any problems. And I would prefer this also from Poland, but unfortunately there's a geographic condition are different. So I would say our approach is not that we reject all this idea. I wouldn't say, of course, we know, and it should be a debate, European between scientists, because we know that it's very difficult to really be totally sure that there is global warming caused by human activity. But like Blaise Pascal, we can say, okay, it's better to say it is so. It is so. Yeah, but we have to first of all allow open debate about this. Is it, and also about method to tackle with the problems and our European way, and also we have also as a societies as a different goal. We have, for instance, security of supply. Yeah, we have, and we know how changing the attitude of the broad public is. Now everybody, especially in so-called Western countries, is for protection of environment. But on the other hand, the people would like to have a cheaper energy, electricity, for instance. And what will happen if they not have really electricity, and then blackout will come? It would be probably then the acceptance for energy transformation would decline very soon. So it's just the questions of responsible policy, and not to be a populist. And if I look, I must say, of the and there are now in European Parliament some very young people, from wealthy country in the green fraction without life experience. Yeah. And it's always they look wealthy, healthy, and but then I say it's sometimes in the ideological zeal that do not see reality and the complication are connected with this. And what is the best solution? This is just, as I said, I would say, really Europe. That means that compromises, and in which all arguments are really heard, in which we have a really good assessment, if we allow the different voices of the different specialists to talk about, and so on. So once again, say if somebody says we conservative, we are probably not so good concerning our attitude to democracy. We are not democratic enough. That is, I think, it opposite the case. Yeah. That we are for open discussion, that we are for democratic decision, and not ideological limitation. And this is, as you probably remember, this was always that the revolutionary left was not known for peaceful, for sympathy for peaceful change and rational arguments.
Yeah, and I really like how you turned the tables on the so-called Euro federalists there at the beginning, Professor, who very often would heap on us the label of being populist, when on this specific issue, as you pointed at the beginning, there seems to be a whole lot of pandering going on their side to a constituency that doesn't really see the environment as any sort of real policy issue that has real life implications for people. And for us to make the case that, yes, we should definitely be making policy adjustments on the margins to tailor to a changing climate, but we should also be caring for the livelihoods of people and also to bring about some more realistic policies than just, as you said, the sort of who gives more kind of dynamic there. And I know that Poland was just announced earlier in the summer that it's going to build up 6 new nuclear reactors before 2040, right? And that's just an example of the other side of the issue kind of seems to paint a sort of a binary choice between having fossil fuels and not having fossil fuels. And there's obviously a wider set of possibilities as that decision portrays. But I wonder, we're nearing the end of the hour, Professor, and I wonder if we can just quickly get your perspective on one last question before we break. As you and I were discussing before going live, Poland has again been on the news in across the continent for a recent ruling that the Constitutional Court reached on abortion. And as has been the case on many other issues, there's been a whole lot of misinformation going on. People in Western Europe are being fed a narrative that doesn't comport with how the Polish people really feel around this issue. Can you give us your perspective and maybe a bit of a background on how the issue reached the court and what the possible fallout of this ruling is going to be, and what our audience should know about this ruling?
Yeah, first, of course, I would say, of course, it's a very complicated problem because in a way, this is also conflict of values. I understand the position that there is one of the value of self-decision of the woman about, life and the choices and so on. But on the other hand, and I think everybody who is honest have to agree. It is a question of life, of life, and the questions of the right to life, and now Polish society is a split about this, like in many other societies, I would say. But generally in the western part of our continent now, these people who do not see a moral dilemma in this and are proponent really for free abortion, I think dominate. I remember, Germany in the late 70s, and when the German in this respect was much more traditional country than Poland was under communism at this time. And so on. And there was, I would say, when we go back, different also, I think, attitude in the societies in Ireland and Spain and so on. But first of all, I think a precondition of the rational situation is to say that it is a moral problem, a big moral problem. If somebody said it is not a problem, then there is, I think, the end of the discussion. And we have in Poland, on one hand, the group of the society, and it is also vocal and big group. They wanted in Poland to change our law and protection of the human life because of the eugenic abortion. Yeah. And especially and once again, I think every honest person will say it is a problem. This is the problem of the children of Down syndrome, which are not ill, which are different, which of course, and so on. And we know that there's now in Poland, I think 90% of all abortion is from justified by the changes in the fetus and pathology of the fetus, but most of these children, 90%, they are Down syndrome children. And this is, and of course, we are still in Catholic society. We know how is Catholic teaching in this, especially John Paul II, which is sent in Poland, which is an important person in the Polish history, also in our way to contemporary freedom from communism. And he was a vocal critic of so-called civilization of death. And it's also concerns of euthanasia, which is also now more and more accepted and also legal in many countries. Just recently, in the beginning of this year, de facto also in Germany and so on. And now one of the group, this was, I think, 3 years ago, there was a signature, there were petitions signed by many, a million of people sent to Polish parliament. They wanted, to change the law and so that this eugenic abortion will be not, from eugenic reason, will be not allowed anymore. And then, as you probably know, there was a protest. There was even a debate in the European Parliament, and so on and so on. And then the things was the questions was sent to now a constitutional court, and the Constitutional Court is obliged to take a position. But our Constitutional Court hesitated long. And now there was a time to give the sentence on this. And you probably also remember there was a big discussion about constitution in Poland, defense of constitution, and allegedly our breaking rule of law. This was that we do not comply with our constitution and so on. Now everybody forgot now the constitution. Of the people who criticize us now for this. What the Constitutional Court said, he said only this, that this eugenic abortion is not in accordance with our constitution. You can read this, because in our constitution it's stated that we protect the human life from the conception till the natural death. That's all. That means that our critics who criticize our lack of rule of law should be very satisfied now, because but they are never satisfied, because they actually they used constitution only as a tool for political change and the criticism of our government, and because they cannot acknowledge the fact that we have a conservative government in Poland. So they are instrumental. In a way, also they use in this topic, for political reason. And now there is, of course, big discussion, but I say the society is divided. We do not know, actually, I do not know the social polls, so what is the prevailing opinion of the Polish people. I think maybe there were attacks on the churches and on MPs and so, and once again, dismissed that with a very vulgar, vocabulary and so on. Like there was a destroying of, of monuments. I don't know. For instance, there was Ronald Reagan monument in Warsaw was attacked as a why Ronald Reagan. I do not know, because Ronald Reagan has nothing to do to this topic. It is like Antifa in everywhere, or like what we saw in American cities, where sometimes these people are allowed to make the argument or demonstrate the position, but once again it stands out that there is a myth that they are against violence or against for freedom and something, because they are for violence and the problem itself is complicated, because probably now the Polish parliament has to decide what to do with this ruling of the Constitutional Tribunal. Maybe they would like to change. There are some voices of the people from my party that say that we should differentiate between the cases in which we have such a case as the children with the Down syndrome, with the cases in which, for instance, this fetus is lethal and there's no possibility to preserve its life, and so on. So it's not easy to solve, but I would say generally I would say that also the nomination of the new judge to the Supreme Court in the United States, where she was also very attacked by liberal press, and so this is the same. But it is a changing mood. I think everybody can agree that abortion is a very cruel procedure. Yeah, it's a cruel. Also, cruelty when it's somebody who is talking about, and we have in the European Parliament the people who would say, it's a cruel how we treated animals. Yeah, and so this also the question: should we so cruel treated the human being? And to the end, I would say, in Germany there was a great discussion about, I forgot this. When we produce the meat from the chicken, the male chicken are eliminated in the agriculture at the beginning. There are million male chicken which are. And somebody said, okay, we can develop a method, not so cruel method. We destroy already eye, and the eyes. I forgot the word. Let's say it's so complicated to explain. Yeah.
Sure, but it's just the example here. I guess you're trying to draw up is the idea that there's a distortion in the values, where on one side those who would like to have unregulated, free at the point of use abortion are on the question of animal rights. They don't seem to function on the same sort of premises, right? But I really appreciate you, Professor, for allowing us to better understand how the issue of abortion is evolving and how Polish society is grappling with it, and some of the context for this ruling previously. And just generally, thank you so much for answering all of our questions. This has been a very wide-spanning discussion, and I'm sure our audience will really appreciate hearing your perspective. This has been the third episode of our Rediscovering Conservatism series. And again, Professor Krasnodebski, thank you so much for your time and for speaking to us. And we look forward to seeing you all on a future edition of this series. Thank you.
Thank you for invitation. Thank you for our talk. Thank you.
Thank you.